trying to have a background that's not just like the green wall so it looks like I live in a real house. I do. Hello my precious everyone, welcome back to Wow Mel. Today I'm here to bring you some role-playing tips. Just a really quick disclaimer, I am by no means a professional role player or D&D player or actor or any of those things, and what works for me and my table might not work for you, so please keep that in mind throughout the video. A lot of these tips will be geared more towards the verbal and physical act of role-playing, but if you're interested in tips for character creation or character inspiration, or on how to better flesh out a character and make them feel more real, feel free to leave a comment and maybe I'll make a video on that in the future. But with that, let's get into the tips. Tip number 1 is to consider how to portray them physically. Though it might be a little more difficult to do or show if you're playing like D&D online, this is a simple tip to make your role-playing feel like a little bit more well-rounded. When you're at the table, consider the physical way you are expressing your character, what they're saying, and what they're doing. If they're more of a sophisticated, noble character, consider standing up straight. If they're more of a boisterous, loud character, maybe they have a lot of arm gestures while they're speaking, kind of like I do. Perhaps if they're a little bit more shifty, they can be kind of crouched over or fiddling with their hands while they're talking. Not only will this add a new layer to how you roleplay, but actually physically acting as the character does can help you stay immersed in the moment, and it'll keep you from breaking character. Tip number 2. Give them a voice that's different than yours. I want to start this off by saying that this is not a necessary step. None of these tips actually are necessary to having a good time, but having a character voice that's different from your own voice can be very helpful. Not only is it an easy way to make your character just a little bit more memorable, but it actually really helps other players and the DM know when you're talking in character versus out of character. Plus, if you're using a different voice for your character, it's easy to stay in their headspace because as you're talking, you're sounding like them. And if you combine sounding like them and physically acting as them, it's a lot more easy to stay immersed in the moment. In the future, I may make a whole video about how to make voices for characters and NPCs, but just as a really bare bones rundown, here are a few different ways you can change your voice for a character. You of course can do accents, but those can be intimidating and tricky to learn. So if you don't want to do an accent, you can change the pitch of your voice. Like, I can talk down low and this is the same voice and this is the same way I'm enunciating everything, but it's just deeper. I shouldn't have done that. I'm not really good at going low. You can also make a character talk really fast and that'll definitely stick out to people. And I don't know if this is the correct way to word this, but you can sort of change the power behind their voice. You can make them speak a little bit more softly, like maybe they're not sure of themselves, or you can be loud and you can project and, you know, have a bit of power behind the voice. Those are all ways that you can manipulate your own voice, and using combinations of those, you can get tons of voices even without bringing the whole accents into it. And if you can bring in accents, that just unlocks a whole new scope of voices. Tip 3. Consider the way they speak. I know I just talked about voices, but this is less about how they sound and more what they're saying. A character's way of speaking often comes from the way they were raised, so if they're more educated, perhaps they speak more formally or they use larger words. If you don't have a very expansive vocabulary, no worries, you can still pull this off by writing down a list of words and just dropping them into conversation. Bonus points if you misuse the word often and your character just says it to sound smart. You can also give them a few repeat catchphrases or sayings that they enjoy and they say multiple times, but be careful not to overdo it as it can get a little bit grating. But if you think about real life and the people you know, or perhaps even yourself, you can probably think of a phrase or two that they say a lot, and you might have even picked up from them. It doesn't have to be anything complicated. My paladin Sylvestus usually just goes, "In the name of Tyr," before slaying an enemy, while an NPC of mine goes, "riveting," when something decidedly not riveting is happening. Tip number 4, a quick way to slip into voices. If your character does have a different accent or a different voice than how you normally speak, it can be really easy to slip out of it even when you're trying to stay in it. This is doubly true if you haven't played the character long because you're likely not totally used to the way they're speaking yet. A trick to slip back into the voice is to have a phrase prepared that sounds distinctly like them. I know that probably sounds confusing, so here's an example. I have a character named Maeve, whose voice started out kind of like an off-brand jester from Critical Role, and now has a life of its own. Whenever I find myself losing the voice, I say Titus to myself. Titus is the name of another NPC in the campaign, but because the way she says his name is so distinct, it helps me sort of re-ground myself in her voice and the way that she pronounces things. Titus himself actually has a really bad French accent for his voice, so whenever I need to be him, I actually usually open up speaking French, and that kind of sets the tone for things. So if he runs into the party, he's usually like, "Oh, bonjour noir," and kind of things go from there. So it's good to pick out and perhaps practice a key phrase or word or sentence that you can nail in that character's voice. So whenever you slip out of it, you can just say it, even whisper it to yourself if it would be weird for that character to suddenly blurt that, just so that you can slip back into the voice. It's also a lifesaver for DMs if you ever have a lot of NPCs with a lot of different voices so that they don't all start getting muddled together. Tip number 5. Consider how your characters react when they have emotions and give them tells. I love this tip because it's so multifaceted. On the surface, it's always good to figure out how your character will react when they have strong emotions. Obviously, each situation that they get into and each reaction will be a bit different, but in general, it can help to know that if they're angry, do they clench their fists and grit their teeth, or do they take a deep breath because they're calm and composed and don't want to feed into that negativity or lean into the aggression? When they're sad, are they the type to get choked up and cry, or maybe they'll just go really quiet? The reason I bring this up is firstly because it is a good thing to consider when making and playing a character, because it's one way of fleshing them out, and so you won't be caught off guard if something serious happens that would trigger such emotions. But now that you might know how they react, you can consider how they would portray that physically again, in a bit of a show not tell kind of style. For example, if your character is getting mad, rather than just speaking like you're mad or saying, "I'm mad," you can cross your arms and furrow your brows. Even if you're more of a third person versus first person kind of role player, you can still describe the way your character's eyes widen and their lips quiver as they're gazing at something that they're fearful of. Again, it's not necessary, but thinking about the physical ways your character reacts to emotional situations can add another layer to your role-playing. The other cool part of it is, if your party is perceptive, they might be able to start picking up on when something is wrong, even if you otherwise give no other indication of it. To do this, you can give your characters tells of sorts. My paladin Sylvestis has 2 of them. Firstly, when she's holding back information, lying, or otherwise feeling a little bit nervous, I will begin to braid my hair. Sylvestis loves to braid hair, so she does this to herself when she needs to sort of self-soothe, which indicates that something is wrong and she's trying to give herself comfort. Her other one is more so when she's less nervous and more so downright afraid or upset, she will clutch the holy symbol around her neck. These are all minor things, but if your party begins to notice that your character does this every time something bad happens, they will begin to associate the action. So if something an NPC says upsets your character, but they don't say, "Hey, that was upsetting," but they might still clutch their necklace, the party might pick up on that and know that something is wrong. The consistent tells are nice because they can show some insight into your character without you having to say anything. And I like that a lot because it feels a bit more real. When my family or close friends are upset about something, I can usually tell just by the way they walk in the room. So you can use this method to translate that into D&D, and it will make your party all feel a lot closer if they can sort of sense each other's emotions without any words cards needing to be exchanged. Tip number 6, my final tip is to practice. Now this might seem obvious, but role-playing is an actual skill that you can actually practice, falling somewhere along the lines of acting in improv. While ideally we could all take improv classes, that's not really an option for all of us, though if it is, I honestly recommend it. I heard it's super helpful, especially for DMs. Luckily, if you can't, there still are plenty of other ways to practice. Firstly, of course, at the table you should let your DM and party members know that you're interested in trying to put yourself out there and roleplay a little bit more, and they should all be super supportive, and if they aren't, kick their butts. Each session you participate in, you're going to get a little bit better, but you can practice even outside the table. When you're driving or in the shower, you can practice your character's voice, and honestly, you can ramble and monologue to yourself. It's a good opportunity to practice scenarios in your head, especially if you might have an idea for something that comes up next session. You can sort of practice a response in a way. But if you feel uncomfortable just rambling aimlessly at yourself, or you never have a sort of direction for it, I recommend Ginny D's point of view roleplay videos, which I will link in the description. In these videos, she gives you questions to work off of, and she plays a character that's talking to you, so not only will she speak to you, you can think of an answer and she will actually reply. It might feel a little bit more natural and a little bit less awkward than just straight up talking to yourself. Plus, Ginny D's amazing. Either way, if you want to improve your ability to think on the fly and be in your character's shoes, you really just have to practice. But don't sweat about it, because it will get easier with time. Thank you so much for watching this video to the end. I hope I was able to be of some help to you. If there are any other good role-playing tips you know, or if there are any other sort of advice videos you want me to make, just let me know in the comments below. Did that rhyme? Yes, I'm amazing actually. If you are interested in Dungeons & Dragons, cosplay, and all things geeky, consider subscribing to my channel or checking out my Instagram account at wow__Mel. Have a beautiful day, my precious everyone, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!